The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew. When the Magi had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said to him, "Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and stay there until I tell you. Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him." And Joseph rose up and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod, that what the Lord had said through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod had died, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, and he said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead." He rose, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go back there. And because he had been warned in a dream, he departed for the region of Galilee. He went and dwelt in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled: "He shall be called a Nazarene." The Gospel of the Lord. There must have been a game going on or something yesterday. We were pretty light at 5:30. There were a lot of Catholics, Southern Catholics, missing, taking in a game, I think. Just 3 or 4 days ago, we read the accounts of the birth of Jesus in our world. What an amazing event. That our God chose to be born in flesh in our world. And we read the story of the huge journey of the young couple moving from Nazareth to Bethlehem so that they could be registered in accord with the new census by Caesar Augustus. And as they were making their way, that was a rather lengthy journey, almost 100 miles. And traveling with Mary on the back of a donkey and Jesus walking most of the ways. Can you imagine how many breaks it required? It must have been some kind of journey. And meanwhile, all of those questions, along the way, where are we going to give birth to our child? Who's going to help us with the birthing of this child? Are we going to be safe in the midst of all of these travelers, people coming and going all sorts of directions? The questions must have loomed large, and meanwhile, all the time, the eternal plan was unfolding. What had been given us from the beginning? The Messiah, the Christ, was coming into the world. The plan was unfolding, and Luke gives us the description of the birth at Bethlehem. Although the manger was no Ritz-Carlton, we all are comfortable with, and each year we kind of reconcile ourselves with the fact and with the scene. The manger, how he was birthed in the stable. So well described by the song, "Silent Night, Holy Night," and the angels and the shepherds surrounding the sight and the birth of the child there in the stable, who would transform the world, change the world more than any other person who ever entered the world. And the questions, what does this mean? What does it mean for us 2,000 years later? And then we come today to celebrate that family. And the peace and quiet are gone now, oh so quickly. Strange how that happens in life, isn't it? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It happens all the time. I mean, you have a great sense of peace, and like that, it can be gone. And Matthew reminds us in his gospel, the paranoid king, Herod the Great, is fearful of this child. His power is threatened. And word is out that he is intent on killing this child. And so the family, through the word of the angel in a dream to Joseph, have got to move again. They move to neighboring Egypt, the next country, and they become refugees. What's it like to be a refugee? This had to be like a splash of cold water in their face. Man, all of the troubles of the journey along the way, and the questions and the birthing and the stable and no room in the inn, and now another issue is like a splash of cold water in the face. But in reality, it's like just a splash of reality. And the reality is that no family, no matter how holy, lives a stress-free life. No family. There's stress in all of our lives, and it's a clear reminder of another factor, that the universal conflict and tension between the forces of good and evil are always at play. The forces of light and darkness, the forces of grace and sin, they are always constant in the world. And another point that Matthew helps us to see is that the forces of evil are already set up against Jesus at his birth. We know that in our Catholic doctrine. We call it original sin, the sin influence that we are born into. But Matthew makes another very critical point in the gospel, that although our decision to follow Jesus takes us along the road to eternity and eternal happiness, that road is not smooth. And it certainly is not always paved. The journey of being a disciple in the modern world requires a lot of effort. There's no shortcut, no simple way to it. And today we reflect on this little family trying to navigate all these challenges. They are the kinds of challenges that are navigated by many a contemporary family. We look at the issue of the birth, threat to the life of their child immediately after the birth. You know what that is like? Parents that have experienced that, the danger or the threat to the life of their child shortly after that child is born. And for some people, that doesn't work out. When they hear the words of the doctor and they say, "I'm sorry, we did everything we possibly could, but we couldn't save his or her life," right after the birth. What a devastating experience. And Joseph and Mary, faced with that reality, it's perfectly reasonable to think that they had the very same kinds of questions that most contemporary families have. What do we do next? What do we do now? And Joseph, despite the fact that he was having these dreams and God was speaking to him in the dreams, and despite the fact that he was aware of God's presence supporting them, he still had all of these questions. Mary, meanwhile, meditating and reflecting and wondering, what is this yes going to mean? What is the end going to be? And maybe Joseph, you can imagine Joseph leaning over and saying to Mary, "Hey, ask for a sign. Ask him for a sign, at least to let us know we're doing the right thing." You know how easy it would have been for Joseph? He'd say, "Hey, you know, you're the one that got us into this." Right? I mean, it's a pure man thing, right? Hey, ask him. You do the praying. Ask him. What a great struggle. And he might have said, had we known at the outset. And Mary would say, what? Would you have done something differently? And through it all, the eternal plan was unfolding and all of the pieces falling into place based on the promise of old. How difficult to see that when we're in the midst of the issue. The plan is seen clearly only when we have moved through that trying experience. Isn't that the message? That's the ultimate message. We only see it when we look back over it. And when we have endured the trial or the challenge, and then we look back and we say, you were there all the time. Sure, following his plan requires a great stepping out in faith. During the Christmas Masses, I talked about the value, the importance of having a plan. How a plan can help us in the face of the challenges that we encounter. Particularly the idea of having a plan in place for ourselves, knowing the challenges that are out there in the world. How easy it is to have our peace disturbed when we go out in the modern world, right? You found that? Oh, come on. Help me out. You mean you really haven't found that? Man, every day when I go out listening to the BS, how unbelievable. Man, you can lose your bearings and lose your peace every day. It can be traffic, it can be people, it can be discussions. But challenges to the plan can start off great, and how easily that peace can be surrendered. I say to people oftentimes when they come to confession, peace is the net result of the sacrament of reconciliation. But be careful, because you could lose it before you get out of the parking lot. How true. As we were leaving Mass on Christmas Day, my good friend reminded me of the old adage. The old adage, the best laid plans of mice and men oft go awry. True. The words of Robert Burns, the great Scots poet, who was a farmer. And his writing these words came as a result of an experience. His father was a poor farmer. And he inherited the farm, and he is working the farm plowing, and he upturns a nest of mice. And he understood the issue so well. He stood there and he scribed that great poem to a mouse. Speaking to the mouse, saying, I know how difficult this is that I have upturned your nest, and how valuable and important this nest is for winter, which is coming. And he bemoans the reality that he has upturned this nest. The best made plans of mice and men oft come to naught. What a great truth. The best made plans of men indeed can go awry, but not the eternal plan. The eternal plan has forever moved toward fulfillment, despite the disruptions, despite the refusal, the whole experience of Israel being an acknowledgement of that fact. The plan of God was never disrupted. The young family that we celebrate today certainly knew that and continued to push forward through numerous obstacles. They could have thrown their hands up in the air and said, it's enough. It's enough. Give us a break. It's too much. But they didn't. And that is why they are so important to us, because their faith and their endurance in the face of many obstacles and challenges, he led them back to Nazareth, where they had come from in the beginning. And they began the ministry of family, being family to one another. And then we don't hear a great deal until his public ministry begins. A family of faith. And here at St. Paul, our Holy Family is faced with all of these same similar challenges and difficulties. What do we do now? What do we do next? Where do we go? How do we know what to do? I wish I could see more clearly how to move forward. What is the right thing to do? How do I know? I wish God would reveal to me in a dream, just like Joseph, or each of us could say the same. I wish he would reveal to me in a dream just what to do. Maybe he does. I wish I could know the final cost. I wish I could know a lot of things. But we realize these are very important questions and very valuable, and we realize also that we are not able to answer all of these questions. And it confounds us with the same reality. What is he asking us to do? When we began our capital campaign, we decided not to engage the services of a professional company. It was a good decision. And it was based on the fact that we have a tradition as a family of giving generously and being responsive to the mission of the church. And we didn't want to pressure people, as oftentimes professional companies do in trying to generate the money. We wanted it to be our own response to him and to the mission of our church. So throughout the month of January, you're being invited to make a decision about our future. Our people have registered some choices already, but now we're asking you to make a pledge based on what the Lord is asking you to do. That is what I asked you back in June when we went through this. Ask the Lord how to respond. That's exactly what I did. And he told me how to respond. And I think that's the invitation to all of us throughout the month of January. And then we will know. We'll know a lot about ourselves and about him.